Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of The Last Transmission with me, Chris Turner, and today we're joined by another good friend of mine, surprise, surprise. That's author of Beasts of Britain and all-round good guy, crypto enthusiast, Andy Mcgrath. Welcome to the show, Andy.
How you doing, Chris?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, mate. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a while since I was just thinking about it earlier today. I was thinking, when was the last time we met up? Obviously, before all the COVID stuff went on. I think we did
Yeah.
two field trips, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We were in Galloway Forest Park in Scotland.
Yeah.
We're looking for elusive stick signs and stone piles and rock stacks and things like that. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, and the time before that was the Bournessie promotion that we did for Beast of Britain, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the Beast of Britain promo reel, sizzle reel. You did an awesome sizzle reel for me, actually, that I still have on my channel and watch back and aspire to be as good as, in the future.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to do something going forward and follow that up with something much better. So that was we were just looking at the dates. That was 2017. So that's getting on for 5 years ago. So I guess that's a good place to start with. What got you into the lucrative world of cryptid research?
It's funny you should mention the lucrative world of crypto research or cryptid research. I've had 2 cryptocurrency emails today saying, hey, I'd love to be on your show and talk about crypto. I've got a great new product. And that seems to be a lot more lucrative, although more risky than this genre. That's for sure.
It depends. Yeah, depends on your investment.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, any cold call is a con call, isn't it? Really, but what got me into it really was seeing these shows by Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and the In Search of program with Leonard Nimoy. And that, as a little child, I loved the old Star Trek, the classic Star Trek. My father used to make us watch the reruns on TV, and I just loved In Search of because it had Spock. Spock was the narrator; he was the presenter.
Yeah,
and I can remember the Ogopogo episode and the Loch Ness episode when they claimed to have captured something, and just being really hooked into it. And after that, I just kept clippings. If there was a little story in the newspaper, I'd go out and buy the newspaper and keep a hold of it. Or once the internet started to take off, I'd be in the chat rooms or downloading conversations and emails and little clips of Paddy and everything else that came afterwards in that world. And
so that's a long time.
A long time. I mean, in my bio it says 25 years of cryptid research. That was in 2016. I wrote that, so that's we're getting on for a while. And to be doing anything semi, not semi-professionally, but as a constant in your life for over 30 years is a strange thing. To be that old is a weird thing. Anyway, and I just got into it and I stayed with it. And then when I was 40 years old in 2016. Me and my wife, we've been working in central London in medical, private healthcare for 7-8 years in management, and we'd saved a bunch of money. And we said, hey, this is what an awful life, 50-hour weeks, 3-hour daily commutes from a round trip from where we lived. And why don't we just work on our own projects for a while? We've got some savings. And she said, what about this monster thing that you're always talking about? Monsters is what she calls them. I said, yeah, sure. Maybe I'll make a TV series and I'll try and sell it. And I'll talk to my friend who was in TV at that time. And he said, oh, don't do that. Write a book. Because if you just give this idea to somebody now, they're just going to steal that. There's nothing to say that it's yours, that it belongs to you. Anybody could just take that and run with it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, so I started to write this book. And I got in touch in the early days with people like Carl Schuker, who I'm still in touch with now and again, who's a really accomplished cryptozoologist and a doctor at the same time of zoology, and yet really friendly and easy to approach, and gave me good advice. And Richard Freeman and other people who were around at that time, and just said, hey, I want to write this book. I think I spoke to John Downs at the CFC and said, look, you've got a publishing company, can I write this book for you? Here's the concept. It's called Beasts of Britain, and it'll be about different creatures in the British Isles. And I had no idea what would be in it at the time. I'd had this American friend who was sort of making fun, saying, "Well, what have you got? You've got Nessie, and that's it. That's all you've got there." And I was, I started putting together a little list of some of the things I could think of, and most of them seemed more like legendary creatures, like the
That's what you
park,
thought.
or yeah, exactly, the old black shuck. And then I started looking and finding these great things, and one thing led to another. I wrote the book and rewrote it, and I've just published a new one.
Yeah, well, I mean, just going back to the delving in. I remember when I first delved into the subject, and it was complete naivety into the world of cryptids. It was brand new. And I've said this many times before, and I think what I think Paul Sinclair said something very similar, that it's an area of research I never even thought I would ever get into. But once it grabs you, that's it. And obviously, in my opinion, there's a connection to the other paranormal stuff as well. So, what was that like, that first few years, or the first year of actually taking accounts and being in the world, or certainly the UK cryptid arena, if you like? What was it like that for coming into that?
Tell you what it was like. It was an uphill climb, a steep learning curve in discernment, is what it was like. And really, as I was publishing blogs that were supposed to be in the book, that's how I wrote the book. So I'm writing this book. I started interviewing on podcasts. I started publishing blogs that were going to be chapters in the book on various cryptozoology pages and paranormal pages, even all over Facebook and the internet. And dealing with some real, fierce feedback, let's put it that way, and just fighting in those little realms, and observing the cliques and the genres, the philosophies that dominated parts of the of cryptozoology and the paranormal side of things as well, and trying to decide, what I thought was genuine or real about it, or could be that could be accepted as evidence besides outside of the person's own philosophy who was giving it to me. Was this person into the paranormal? Did they have a long history of seeking strange and unusual creatures? Did they think it was a woo? Did they think it was a flesh and blood creature? And within that paradigm, what seems to be completely acceptable outside of their personal opinion, the sightings they were giving? And it was tough. It was really tough. I learned a lot in those first 3 years. I learned to keep my mouth shut. That was one of the things I really learned. But it did take a few years. It's not in my nature. I grew up in kind of a rough part of Wales, and people who kept their mouth shut when they were abused were stomped on. So it's my reaction is always to jump back in and give as good as you get. But yeah, I've learned to keep my mouth shut, and it has really helped me this past year.
So, but in that first year, there were obviously some very strong. There must have been, because for me there were some really, what I thought were some really solid accounts and that was enough. I mean, in fact, I'll be honest, it probably would have only taken one account, because I guess one account is enough. So, can you remember any of the accounts that particularly stood out?
Yeah, I can remember. I can remember getting a very specific account from, and anybody who's listened to me before would be quite familiar with this, from a primate keeper who'd worked in the zoo for many, many years and worked directly with primates for a long, long time, and had been camping in Abernethy Forest in Strathspey in the Scottish Highlands, and with his brother back in 2012, and gone rabbit hunting early one morning, and noticed a big black sort of hairy creature that looked crouched over by a blackberry bush about 50 yards away from them, that suddenly stood up and turned to face them. And this guy was shocked to see an upright ape. He described it as kind of like an older bonobo chimp in the face. Anyway, it was balding on top slightly, but had a flatter muzzle than you would expect to see on a bonobo. Really thick set, about 7 feet tall. Looked at them he drops his light firearm, and they were hunting rabbits. So I imagine they would have something very light, and it just drops to one knee, and this creature turns and walks away off into the distance, and keeping him inside. And he's shocked, turns to speak to his brother and say, "Oh my God, what was that?" And his brother's gone. He's left. He's scarpered. And gets back to the car. This guy, and his brother's already packing up the entire camp. And
Which you would.
they never go wild camping together again. He won't talk to me. He never comes back. I think he says something. By the time I got back to my camp, he says my brother already had the tarp bunk and bits stuffed in bags and was working on mine. And he says I tried to stop him as I wanted to stay and look for what we had just seen, but he wouldn't even speak to me. He later sold all his camping and fishing gear and never returned to the forest. So I mean, that was a very, even though I could never get this guy to go public, and his name is changed, it's hidden from his real name. That's a great thing. He said he believed what he saw was a simian, not a hominid, and it was not human in any form apart from its bipedal upright stance. Looked like an upright gorilla with arms and huge thighs, with a bonobo-like face, only flatter. So that was one of the early sightings I took, and I just thought, wow, the guy has direct experience. This is a man who's worked with primates for 30 plus years. He knows them inside and out. I am aware of the zoo that he's worked at, and that he's been a consultant, and yet he can't unsee what he's seen. This is a great qualification.
Well, that is an amazing. I remember the account now. It's an amazing account, but also leads me to my next question, which is, I remember when we met. I think it was. I can't remember where we were. Now. I was in Dartford doing something or other with my daughter, and we met. Can you remember where we did that filming?
I think
some
it's
big manor house, wasn't
Arundel
it?
Forest, Arundel Manor House, or Arundel Forest.
Ah, that's yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, well, I remember meeting and we did the interview, and back then I think we were both very much, solidly in probably an element of skepticism, but very much, I suppose, in the flesh and blood camp, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
That was back then. Has anything changed in from your perspective back then? Where do you stand now? In what's your stance now on particularly on the British Bigfoot?
I'm more flesh and blood than ever before with all of it.
Oh, really?
With all of it, especially, I mean, if there is a British Bigfoot, the lack of evidence of it doesn't point to a paranormal source to me. It either points to the validity of witness testimony, or perhaps mistaken identity. Although that's quite unusual to be describing a creature like that in this land where there are no bears or large animals that could be mistaken for it. And if they are seeing something like a British Bigfoot, I think it has to be flesh and blood. Something living in the forest, feeding off animals, like the sighting we just described there. They disturbed this creature, this primate keeper, eating blackberries. Doesn't seem like classic paranormal animal behavior, to be honest with you. Or not that I would expect anyway. I don't know if they do eat blackberries. But yeah, I'm fully flesh and blood all the way.
And then, so you've got a lot of international friends who are very well renowned in the subject. So what are they when you come at them with the flesh and blood angle? What do they make of that?
Well, I think most of them are flesh and blood as well. Actually, most of the people I know. I have had conversations with some people that think Bigfoot or the different types of hairy humanoid-like animals around the world are flesh and blood animals, but that perhaps Dogman is a paranormal thing. I won't mention the researcher's name, but he's very, very famous, very well known, and said to me that he believed that Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal, but Dogman must be a paranormal creature, or a werewolf, or whatever, must be a paranormal creature. To which I was kind of astounded to say, well, okay, well, I think that's because we can't fit it in the fossil record anywhere, as far as we know. That is, we can't fit an upright bipedal wolf in the fossil record. But what if this upright bipedal wolf, the werewolves of old in Europe and other places, were actually, a now extinct or nearly extinct, functionally, I can't say the word, functionally extinct species of giant monkey? Like some of those, like these Nachi that's reported in South America, or the Cardan that's reported in the Himalayas. What if it's one of these things? And coming out of the darkness at night, you see this thing with pointed ears and a big long snout, walking on two legs with these kind of limp front hands. Is this a wolf? Am I seeing this big wolf here? Perhaps it has a baboon-like appearance in some way. Some of them. For somebody who was unaware of a creature like that, should one exist, that would be a perfect stand-in for the werewolf thing. And then we can get back out of the paranormal again. I think we slip into the paranormal when we don't have an answer for something, because we can't take, subconsciously, we can't accept that we can't explain what we're seeing. So we have to make like a get out of jail free card. Well, it's because it's, portals and stuff. My personal opinion.
Yeah, but what I was getting at with the American and Canadian thing is that obviously it's I know we've talked about this a lot, and I don't think we'll ever stop talking about how easy it is, the flesh and blood and the landmass and all the rest of it. But we just don't have that option here. So, I mean, we both believe the witnesses. I know you do. We've had conversations about this.
Yeah, I believe the witnesses. Yeah.
It's just, I mean, the question I always get asked is, where are they hiding? I mean, and then we go around in circles in this, don't we? Yeah. We just go around in circles.
We go around in circles, but we've established that there's space for them. Remember that, so in Beasts of Britain book, there's a chapter called, in the Bigfoot section, called What's with the Habitude?
Oh, yeah.
And when we talk about the UK National Ecosystem Assessment in 2012, that discovered that only 6.8% of the UK's land area was urban, and that included rural developments and roads. And the rest of it it's untenanted. And even if you think of the things that me and you do sometimes, even when we went to somewhere that's a popular forest park, like Galloway Forest Park, okay, that's not particularly great for animals because there's a lot of pine plantation there, but still there's a lot of space, and yet there's still a lot of people walking around because it's a popular outdoor area. But most of the country isn't like that. There's not these paths that people are walking on. You go down the country path that's there. You don't stray off into the marshes or the moors, or most people don't anyway. So that's where such things could be. And for me, our inability to find the British big cats, the alien big cats, for example, which seem to almost certainly be here. What have we got? Thousands upon thousands of sightings, over a 40-year period, growing and growing every day, as well as lots of video and photographic evidence, which is, is tenuous in some cases, but it's still showing some remarkably large cats. If we're not finding these guys, something is conspicuous as well and well known, and a hunter essentially that has to go out and predate on certain animals. Well, there's space for something else to remain hidden as well. The one thing that stood out to me about this ecosystem assessment was, okay, they looked at the different countries. Of course, England had the most populated space, 10.6% of England, but it's 54 million people in England or thereabouts, 3.6% in Northern Ireland, 4.1% in Wales, and Scotland was 1.9% of the entirety of Scotland has urban sprawl. That means it's towns, cities, villages, roads, the whole thing. That's the whole amount. Everything else is completely empty. There's nobody there. So they could be here. Just doesn't mean that they are here, unfortunately.
And do you think there's a migrational element perhaps to that?
If there was, it would have to be linked to some sort of food source, I think. And people say, oh, well, they migrate, they move around to different places. Sure, but why would they do that unless they're following some sort of food source? So we'd have to figure out what's the food source that they're following. Deer don't migrate throughout the country. Most other animals are stable. We do have something like 100, what is it? Is it 200 or 100? I can't. A huge amount of Canada geese flying in and out every year, as well as other birds migrating, as well as the established population of Canada geese. So a couple of 100,000 fly in and out every year. Maybe that for eggs and other things that could be a food source. But then they seem to be dispersed throughout the whole country.
Yeah.
Those geese as well. So I don't see why they would be migratory, unless it's a type of roaming behavior that's been developed for safety. But even in that, then they have to go to a new place or an established place they've not occupied every couple of weeks or months or whatever whatever the frequency is, and set up and try to avoid any new human presence in that area every time, should there be one.
Yeah.
And that's why it just doesn't make sense to me.
No, I think I think you're probably right. I think there are
Yeah.
I think there are enough remote key locations, perhaps in Britain, for for it to take advantage of that. I mean, obviously, there are other things I still struggle to get past. However, as you've said earlier, I did a podcast the other week and we were talking about the supernatural element of this, and I was asked, what are the supernatural elements and what percentage do they take up of the actual reports? And it, as you said, not many.
Not many.
So why then do we jump to the conclusion that there is some sort of paranormal element to this? And I guess my answer to that would be probably just all the stuff we talked about and the improbability, if you like, of something surviving and going undiscovered. And it's a strange. I guess it's probably similar to a lot of the UFO subjects in that this subject you can't escape the circle. You're on a constant loop of how, why, and it's always the same questions. And every few years, some guy will come up with an interesting theory, and then we'll add that to the circle, and we'll carry on. I mean, I'll just keep in the circle. I'm quite happy to be in the circle because it is a fascinating subject. But
yeah, I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong with anything that's evidence. If that's the case, then that's the case. Hands up. That's great. We can't say you're looking for evidence or proof of something.
Yeah.
And then when irrefutable or near irrefutable evidence is shown to you, to say, well, actually, no, I don't accept that. What I've noticed about, you said about this paranormal thing and about people asking what the paranormal aspects are of the sightings. There is an element, and if you take yourself out of your cultural bubble, not you, but people in general, outside of your cultural bubble, where without realizing it, you believe upon basic precepts and suppositions of how the universe and God or no God or whatever is comprised and how it reacts. So let's take, for instance, you have somebody sees, let's say several people see some sort of a demon, okay, an apparition. So the Christian sees it, he sees a demon. The Muslim sees a jinn. Somebody else from a more archaic and a mystical religion might see like an ancestor spirit or a guardian spirit of the forest. And if you go back to even further pre-Islamic times in the Arabian sphere, they might have seen a genie, right? Something that's beneficial in some way. And yet we all interpret it. Oh, the atheist, for instance, might see an alien, right? Might see an alien creature. Or this is just broad classifications. Each one of these people saw the same thing, but they classify it differently based upon their background beliefs, even without thinking about it. I don't know if you've ever walked past a funeral procession or a line of cars in the street sometimes, and without thinking about it, crushed yourself. But if you've got a Catholic background, like I have, you do that without even thinking. I'm not a Catholic. Well, I'm a Protestant now, but that was our background. So without even thinking, I'm crossing myself. As the cars pass me. That's an automatic, like a knee-jerk muscle memory reaction, a spiritual reaction to something in the spiritual realm I perceive happening before me. a life is left this world and is passing me. Now I'm having this reaction that shows, what I believe or what I used to believe. I think that's the same in all of this stuff too. In fact, it's so close to religious belief, some of this stuff, that it's kind of scary.
No, very much so. Totally,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely, and weirdly, I think a lot of people who are honest with themselves in the subject would agree with you as well.
yeah.
And that actually, what you just said there, lends into the question on the screen from New Heathen. Thank you, Matt. And he's saying, what brief advice can you offer a relatively new cryptid researcher in the UK? I mean, there's a long list of stuff, Andy, but go on. What
Yeah,
can you
I think
offer?
that the best advice is first read everything you can from really good established authors. Not me, other people that came before me, because that's who I copied it from and that's who I learned from. The Bigfoot stuff, Grover Krantz, John Green, Jeff Meldrum, all of those guys, Bernard Hubelmans, of course, and just Ivan T. Sanderson, all the classic writers. Find out everything that you can find out from them, and then when you go out into the field, if you're looking for stuff, question everything you think you found. Everything. You be the guy. You be the devil's advocate to yourself. The worst skeptic. That's how you got to treat yourself when you're out there. You be your own worst skeptic and question, well, that's an X formation. That's fine. Or maybe there's something here. I thought I just heard a knock. Okay, let's go to the bottom of the X formation and see if there's any footprints there. If a big hulking creature has erected some sort of stick structure in the woods, and you'd expect it to leave a trace. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for. Hairs, scat is more difficult because you've got to test it. It's expensive if you don't have something genuine. And especially footprints. Tracks are great evidence, but become prepared to cast them. And you can get minimally expanding, I got this from Jeff Meldrum, minimally expanding insulating foam, insulation foam, like a can of it, and get 2 bits of cardboard and a paperweight, a little brush perhaps, one of your little basting brushes, to clear the area, dust it off, put the foam in so it expands, put the cardboard on with the paperweight, wait 5-10 minutes, and you've got this lightweight cast that you can take away and recast properly later. And that's proof that there's evidence. People can look at that. They can see dermatoglyphics in the little lines that everybody has in their footprints, and more importantly, get reasonable evidence of what they're looking at. Bring something for scale. Bring a camera. Record stuff. If you're recording a close photo of a footprint, get a get a wider view as well. If you come home and you think you've seen some anomalous Bigfoot-like creature in your photos later, once you've checked, you've got to go back and rephotograph that area before you can post it and say, I just saw this or I just saw that. Is this a Bigfoot? Well, you got to go back and see if the shape is still there or if it's gone in that very same spot the next day. Comparative. Take a comparative photo. Come prepared. Little envelopes and tweezers and surgical gloves, baggies, the whole thing. Bring it with you.
Coffee,
Very lightweight.
coffee as well.
If you're going with me, please bring some coffee. I'm going to need that. I'm going to be stopping off. We had a lot of coffee. That Galloway Forest Park area that was bereft of coffee shops. Actually, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I mean, and the thing is with those research trips, they're I love going on the trips. They're a great way of just getting rid of stress and getting some exercise and getting fit and actually being out on the ground. You learn a lot. There are some things that you can't learn without getting out there, and it doesn't matter for the 99.9% of the time you're seeing nothing and finding nothing. But the one thing about being out there I found is that you might stumble across a witness, a surprise, just a conversation in a garage or a coffee shop, or just because that happens, and it happens a lot, and it happens by chance. So yeah, I would say I would say that's good advice that you're giving there. So obviously the next question here is have you guys had your own sighting of a large creature? And I know you thought you might have experienced something.
I talked about it on the podcast, but I was really illustrating how your mind can play tricks on you.
Yeah.
So when I
Yeah.
was last at Loch Ness, which was in 2019, sadly, there was a little pathway that goes up to the Great Glen Highway from Fort Augustus called the Mcgrath, and it's about an hour or so up, I think, and you get to go to the top, and you can just walk around in all the forests. Some parts are really dark and deep, and I'd been up there in January by myself walking. It was very cold for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I was coming down the bottom of the hill. It was a sort of a waterfall, and literally the hill was on a sort of, well, almost 90-degree angle, and I thought I saw like a humanoid shape duck behind a tree in the blink of an eye further up. And as I started coming down the hill back the other way, then I could hear some cracking in the forest, etc. But there are deer there, lots of big deer actually, red deer. There was nobody else around, and really, I started going through a stage of working myself up as after thinking I'd seen something. And the funny thing about it, and that was the reason I spoke about it on one of these podcasts, was that I started realizing how my mind was setting this eerie scene, and the feeling was almost generated by my fear. And I suddenly found I was in the place of, okay, you're here now, possibly in the situation where this is going to happen. You're about 2 hours away from the bottom. So if it happens, you've got no choice but to accept it. Do you want it? And actually, that's a very real question when you get down to it. When you're alone, there's nobody else to validate your disappearance. Yeah, just
You become a
do you want
statistic.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, just as you'll be on David Paulides 411. It's
Yeah.
you never be found again. I hope they make a good episode out of me. And yeah, that's it. Do you want it now? Because if it's a real creature and it exists, and it's following you, or you confront each other in the forest, it's probably as much as like bears are an individual as you are as a person, within your species, and it has various choices for how to react. It could just be curious about checking you out, or could decide to pull your arms off. We don't know how they behave. So yeah, I never had an experience, and that was more an experience of me realizing how you can, part of my language, shit yourself up. Once you're in the right
Absolutely. And
situation.
no,
Yeah.
you can, and the being alone in the woods, in even semi-remote places is frightening.
Yeah.
I know a lot of wild campers and guys that you have to. First bit of advice I would give is probably don't go alone. That's
You shouldn't
for
go alone.
various reasons.
I
For
used to do it
various
all the
reasons.
time. Yeah, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, but it is scary out there. I mean, because it's such an unnatural place to be in as well.
Yeah.
And I've never witnessed anything either. Not for want of trying, of course. But
Yeah.
but that's probably just par for the course, isn't it?
I mean,
Uh,
oddly, Chris, actually, you mentioned the paranormal stuff earlier, and how I'm fully in the flesh and blood camp with the
yeah.
Bigfoot thing. I've had lots of paranormal experiences when I was young, ghostly-like experiences,
Okay.
centered around the house we grew up in, and a martial arts club that my family used to have, which was an old Salvation Army building from the 1800s. And you'd see sort of shadows running up and down the stairs. You'd hear the voices of children and footsteps. I got tapped on the shoulder once or twice when I was using the gym downstairs, and there was nobody there. I was there all alone in the daytime in this old, stone Sally Army building that we'd converted to our club. All kinds of things, but that was specifically a very sort of paranormal phenomena happening there in that location, of a ghostly nature, I think. Whatever um, the origin of that is, I don't know, but it was definitely happening. And in our house we grew up in as well, which is about almost 200 years old, same thing. Shadows. You'd see them running past. There was a big living room, and then we had like a square window looking into the hallway, but it was like bathroom glass. It was
Oh yeah,
frosted,
yeah.
and you'd see a big black humanoid shape run past there, and go up the stairs sometimes.
Wow.
And usually only when folks were out on the weekend, when we're teenagers, or older sister was babysitting us, and we're all sitting up watching something late at night, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of that. No cryptids ever, sadly.
Here we go. So have you found any prints or hair, and what does the UK government and the cryptozoology people say? What's the
Oh,
sort? I
let's
think
see.
we've got an inkling of what their opinion is, but what do you think
Yeah.
about
I've never found any prints here in the UK or hair. I've seen some footprint photographs. I've never been convinced by any of them. All of them look pretty much human, to be honest. There is a catch to that. And I wrote about this in my new book, Hairy Humanoids as well, Beast of the World, Hairy Humanoids. Sorry, plug. If there are different types of hairy humanoids around the world, so a big man ape, for example, in the United States, North America, and some other places of the world, and more of a wild man type in Europe and Britain, like let's say a Neanderthaloid type of creature.
Yeah.
Then the Neanderthal, and you see this with the Almasti in the Caucasus Mountains and the Barmano and the Chitral range near Pakistan and Afghanistan, that they have a human-like footprint with a similar arch, only it's broader and squarer. So you could argue that some of the footprints we've seen recorded, like I think the recently Brickley one in Cannock Chase, recently, and some others, could be argued to be a wild man footprint from the perspective of, if that theory is correct, they would look sort of human.
Yeah. Well, did you ever see the prints I found?
I did. We talked about this, about the running shoe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't think it was a running shoe, and it's something I forgot to mention. I got an email probably not long ago, probably about 4 or 5 months ago. I'd done some filming up at White Coppice, which is near Winter Hill, which is a place near me that I've been investigating, and some of the WIT team as well. And he said, "Look, I just watched your video on you showing the prints." He said, "I'm a runner, and I see a guy that runs up there with no shoes on." And he said, "That's not to say, and he was very polite, and that is what's that? Maybe 3 years after the fact.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. I'm glad that I remained very skeptical about it.
Good.
And I think had it been in possibly a more remote area, and even though that location has got many strange accounts of everything from hauntings to cryptids and UFOs, I think that just shows that sort of find in the wrong hands could have been very misleading.
And I've seen it a lot of times, and I've been guilty in the early days of posting something like that without comment, straight away, as a hopeful in those days of just posting anything that looked like something. I used to do a lot with lake monster things, and I was into the lake monster things so much. There were so many great clips out there, and sometimes I just couldn't figure out if fake, how it was faked, or if mistaken identity, what else it could be, and just I'm validating this. I'm going with it. I won't do that anymore. With the footprints, that's a good thing. I have seen somebody running, quite a few people actually running barefoot here as well, as well as all the river swimmers we have in the River Thames. People regularly just walk down and put their clothes on the side and get a little luminous float and swim off into the Thames. A lot of them actually. And let's say this was in some random location somewhere, and somebody lived in a farm a few miles away, and they went down to the river. They like to swim in. They walked there, and they got out of the river, and you saw their muddy footprints coming out of the river, all the way up to the path and disappearing. You can start to reason, well, who would be in this cold river in the middle of winter? Nutcases, but they are there, right? And there's no car around. Where do these footprints come from? Immediately we're jumping to the extreme answer. It must be one of these, like I write about in the book, amphibious anthropoids, human-like, semi-aquatic wild men. Maybe it's one of these guys. Or it's Mrs. Jessup from 2 miles away in the farm. She's in that case, she likes a cold swim in the morning. She walks down, she does it, she steps out and walks back to the farm, and job done. Mystery solved.
Yeah, my wife who's moderating tonight, Lorraine, she's a wild swimmer. So yeah.
Sorry to call you in that case, Lorraine.
Yeah, it's accurate. She lives with me. Yeah, you have to be a nutcase.
It's
to
just
get in.
because
I'm
too scared to do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's and I suppose it is about discernment. And when I said that someone finding that print in the wrong hands, I didn't mean someone would do it deliberately.
No.
Yes, I meant that, but I
Hopefully.
also
Yeah.
I meant just. I think it's an experience thing, isn't it? And a lot of disappointment. I think for me personally, there was a lot of disappointment along the way as you peeled the layers back and just saw and heard and things that you didn't like. You know, and it's enough. It almost beats the skepticism into you, because I am a hell of a lot more skeptic than I was, and I think it's a good thing. But I think at times I'm a little bit too harsh on myself, because I think what these skeptics forget is that to be a witness must be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's hard.
And that's the one thing I never hear a skeptic even attempt to get the mind into that situation. To be in those shoes and to be told you're crazy or you're a liar or a hoax or whatever, that must be. I can't imagine what that's like.
Well, it also happens so often to people. They often get it so often from people in the community they think they can trust and go to, and say, "You're this guy, or like me, or you, or whoever. Oh yeah, by the way, I had this experience. You know, can I tell you about it?" And you go, "Yeah, well, that's nothing really," and blah blah blah. And you know, they're like, "Oh my goodness!" So the one person I had to trust, even they are going to treat me this way. And you can get into that mindset in this genre when you've been hoaxed a bunch of times, like I have. I've had to. We're talking about discernment, and I've had to walk back, you know, a lot of things publicly over the years, and that's definitely a experience in humility and discernment. But also, I've never been ashamed of anybody I've believed and been proven wrong, because then the onus is on them. If they were convincing enough, if I had no reason to suspect that they were lying and they hoaxed me, I'm just a guy that believed you because you seemed genuine. And this is an unproven genre, really. This is an unproven science. So everything is kind of up for grabs. I'm going to listen to you if you say you've got something. Yeah, I'm a little bit untrusting. You will never feel it from me, but I am sort of secretly dialing my direct line to Interpol and checking you out when you're contacting me. You know? But at the same time, it's only for the validation of the genre. It's not so I can call you out online to anybody. If you know, and it's actually very, very rare these days, but it used to happen a lot. If I've ever not believed somebody and thought they were directly hoaxing me, I've just been very polite and said, "Thank you so much for the sighting. I really appreciate it." And that's the last. You know, that's the last of it. It doesn't happen so much anymore. It used to be a really big thing a few years back.
And also, you know, you can't always be right. You know, you're always going to make mistakes, and you're always going to be, you know, stuff happens in life, and sometimes if you receive a report or you're busy, I mean, I find myself a little bit like that over the last year or so, and I have passed a few sightings on to other researchers who've got the time. I've just been too busy to deal with it.
Sure.
I've always been very polite and everything,
Yeah.
but and you know, that's probably a mistake on my part, to be honest. I wish I probably hadn't done that now, but even so, I mean, as long as you're passing them on to someone that's going to lend an ear and take the sighting and believe them,
a trusted ear, you know, a gentle voice, you know.
So New Heathen's asking, what is the most compelling evidence either of us have experienced or had reported to us?
Evidence?
Yeah. Well, evidence.
Physical evidence. There's oh my door's just
New Heathen, I'm gonna take it you mean in this country. Yeah, we'll go UK, Andy.
Okay, UK, for me, the most compelling evidence I've ever seen is the Robert Ryan's Nessie photos, as well as the sonar contacts taken in the 1970s. That's the not the gargoyle head so much, I suppose, as the Nessie head and neck that they caught mid-water, upside down, chasing a shoal of fish. I think that is incredibly compelling. Now, you have to look at the reputations of those men. A lot of people really really besmirched their whole effort there, especially some people that still exist up at the loch. And yet, you know, these people were responsible for great patents and inventions, and they were lawyers, and they were doctors, and all these different attributes they had. Well accomplished men, and they invented most of the sonar equipment that we use today, that the world uses.
Wow.
That was invented by the team he had up there, you know, as well as I think one of the guys, what's his name now? White Cup for they had doing the photography. and actually, invented the cameras they used to photograph the nuclear explosions, in the 50s in Hiroshima
Yeah.
and these different places. They were accomplished people, and yet, people didn't believe that. I'm still seeing those photos and that the sonar trace that they had with the amazing equipment and photography that they developed. That's it for me. I don't think there's been anything better than that. Not the surgeon's photo, because there's a big debate about how it came about. It
Yeah,
could
yeah,
be a toy submarine. Nobody really knows. But that one, that's underwater, mid-water. It can't be anything else. It's not a log. It was moving. They've got the sonar contact, and they've got the photos. That's the best for me. And maybe
oh,
Paddy after that, the Patterson Gimlin film, pretty compelling. Although there's a lot of dispute about that.
yeah, and Todd's stuff, which we've talked about many times.
Yeah,
And, it's
yeah.
that's still raging, isn't it? The debate, and
Nobody knows. Yeah,
nobody knows, or will ever know.
yeah.
I think for me, the most compelling piece of evidence, I'm trying to, in the UK, I would probably have to say the quantity of what I consider very good accounts. I think that from very good researchers as well, who are very discerning and experienced in these things. So, just trying to think of, and I'll tell you what. I can't say who showed me the photograph, but I did see a photograph. I believe the photograph was taken in Scotland. I did ask to use it in Elusive, but the person didn't want to let me show it. They didn't give me permission to show it, and it was in what looked to me like a Bigfoot in Scotland in the woods.
Wow.
It wasn't a blob squatch. It was straight away you looked at it and thought, wow. And I'm pretty experienced with photography and pareidolia, even back then. And I saw that and thought, wow, is this it? Is this not the smoking gun, but is this is amazing. But that's without any investigation into the person and all the rest of that sort of stuff, or as much as you can do anyway. So yeah, that's sad that I can't show you that.
It's often like
But
that, It's often like that somebody has something amazing and they just, I don't blame them sometimes, but it's just like, oh please.
yeah, I don't blame
Uh,
them. I don't blame them.
yeah. Well, there's a lot that comes
Absolutely
with
not.
it. So you have to understand if you come out as a witness and you give a sighting, there's a certain level of due diligence that has to be. I ask everybody, every single person who reports something to me, well, not in the first instance, but once we start talking, do you have any mental health conditions that would cause you to receive like audio or visual hallucinations? Do you hear voices? Anything like that? Have you ever been diagnosed as being delusional? Not because that doesn't necessarily exclude you from the sighting, because if the thing that you see is outside of the realm of your affectation, then fine, that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But I've got to know, because if you're experiencing that, then we have to take it into consideration. It's one of the boxes you've got to tick off, and people do unfortunately suffer from these things sometimes, and it can happen. You can so yes. Do you suffer from anything like this? In that case, is this outside of your normal experience? And go from there.
So, and have you had people actually come to you and say, "Yeah, I actually do. I have," or in the past, I have.
Well, I've had one person in the past to say yes, yes, they did suffer from paranoid delusions.
That's very honest of
Um,
them.
yeah, but they were convinced that what had occurred was outside of that, and that's fair enough, and I accepted that sighting. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah,
No, when obviously a lot of this and a lot of what we've done in the past has been around the Wildman. We'll call it the Wood War, so the British Bigfoot for everybody that's watching, so they know what we're talking about. But what is going on with this? The rise of the Dogman. I mean, what is from your perspective?
yeah.
What's going on there?
I don't know. I've got a few theories on it actually. And one is that, is it a sort of resurgent folklore? Could we be witnessing the reformation of ancient folklore, but being reimagined and subconsciously implanted in the public consciousness through popular culture, with films, books, and the internet. When I was researching Beasts of Britain, re-researching it for the third edition, final edition, by the way, I was thinking, well, some of the ideas we have about werewolves today, they're based upon the Sabine Baring-Gould's Book of Werewolves from 1865, and in there we hear first that werewolves can change their form on the night of the full moon, and Guyander's book, A Werewolf in Paris, where the werewolf has a weakness to silver, which then obviously translates into the movies later on. And I was thinking, is it something like that, or is this more of an ancient supernatural metamorphosis? Now, there's this famous picture of King Lycon of Greece, and he's being changed into a wolf by Zeus. And this is a punishment for killing and cooking his own son, who he attempts to feed to the god as a test of his omniscience. And because of that, then he's punished. He's turned into this wolf-like creature. And there was many examples in the ancient world of people doing these cult-like rituals, which either a physical, demonic manifestation, or a metamorphosis is brought into being, where the person goes and undergoes this trance, and they believe they've become a werewolf, and they live like that. Even I think Pliny the Elder and Pausanias, they discussed a young athlete called Demarcus, took part in the Acadian sacrifice of an adolescent boy, and then he's compelled to taste the entrails of the young boy, and then he's transformed into a wolf for 9 years. This is thousands of years ago, so it exists even then, 2.5, 3,000 years ago. There it is, and that, to me, all those ideas coming back. Are there still cults that practice these kinds of sacrifices where they become the wolf? I've heard of such things. And is the pop culture that we inherit from our American cousins, is it just starting to re-emerge with the internet and social media and all these sort of cool things we can be into and fun things we can find out about? I don't know.
And then is there a supernatural element to that as well, do you think?
Yeah, well, I've heard several former Satanists talk about invocations where a wolf-like demon has appeared before them, but not personally. Internet, YouTube things, so it could be completely made up. But watching some of these documentaries that on sometimes, I would imagine personally that that type of thing that we're talking about would be more of an affectation where the person believes they turned into a wolf. But then there's another thing to consider as well. Whereas I did an article about it recently that was in it was like a Daily Star article, and we're talking about ergoism or ergotism, where the ergot fungus would infect bread in hundreds of years ago, and people would eat the bread, and they called it St. Elmo's fire, I think, where the whole villages and towns were affected with this rage and horse and barking, and lots of murders and terrible things happened in those times. And could we be sort of reviving a historic description of those terrible, you could say, plagues, or poisoning epidemics in the old world? Could we be rehashing them for the modern world? I don't know.
No, I mean, for me, certainly on the increase, and certainly there is a certain I think there's a certain fascination with the werewolf as well, above, if you want to call it the wild man, poor guy.
Yeah.
There's just something about it because of the werewolf folklore. But there are many sightings. I mean, particularly the ones taken up there on the East Coast. The one with the guy that was lamping on the cliff tops that night, seeing something that looks like a hyena. very, very nothing supernatural about this thing at all. And those reports in that part of the UK have been hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's just ongoing, and more people from every sort of background seeing this stuff. It's just fascinating. It's absolutely bizarre. Here you go. There's a question for you. What do you think? What do you think? There is more chance of a dogman, Bigfoot, or Nessie? Now I know what your answer is going to be. Yes. He's biased.
I think Nessie because, okay, if you think about it, as far as the Bigfoot in the UK goes, okay, we've got the woodrose carvings on our cathedrals, like when you get to Selby Abbey or I forget the other ones. There's tons of them anyway, and we've got woodrose carved upon our noble tapestries, and the heraldry from hundreds of years ago, from the Middle Ages onwards. But that also could be a derivation of a godlike deity, a pagan deity that used to exist, like a faun or a satyr, or even Sylvanus, the shepherd, like God that used to take care of the flocks, who was supposed to be very hairy. Heracles, even, by the way, who was supposed to be very hairy, Hercules, and carry a club, which there's many examples of in England. For instance, Herne the Hunter with his giant club there, a big chalk. Where is that? In Cheddar? I forget anyway. So yes, that is there, but the modern Bigfoot, yeah, he's the Cheddar Man, is he called Cheddar Man? He's holding a big club, isn't he? Yeah. He's got another big club, I know that, but it's not the one I'm talking about. And nobody's holding it. That I forgot about his big club, actually. Apologies. It wasn't on the forefront. That's on the. I was going to say tip of my tongue, but that's the wrong expression. So yeah. So there we are. There is a background for it, but this new thing really has only come back into play since our good friends gave us the Finding Bigfoot series, and maybe a little bit before that. But this big collection of sightings has grown since 2011 onwards. Perhaps people felt brave enough to start reporting again and digging. That's fine, but there's a big gap of hundreds and hundreds of years before it. And it was pointed out to me before by a very unpleasant person, but he was right, that there is this giant gap. That doesn't mean it's not real. Maybe people just weren't confident to report it. Nessie, however, there have been reports, not just for the last 86 years or so, but going on before. Roland Watson has got a great few books about, let's say, the water horses of Loch Ness, and there's others as well, where he goes into all of the old legends in Britain and the Highlands especially, and describes all of these great water horse sightings going back hundreds and hundreds of years, between that period of St. Columba's Nessie sighting and the modern advent of Nessie hysteria, in 1933. So I think definitely it's going to be Nessie. As far as the Dogman and Werewolf goes, it's something of ancient myth and legend in the UK, and you could argue that the sightings have actually only started taking place again or being reported in the last couple of years, 7 or 8 years even, for the main bulk of them, and they've coincided with the Dogman trend that came from America. There was this Bigfoot trend and the Dogman trend, and now there's a Mothman thing. There's a rake thing now. Rake is the trend. There's lots of rake sightings popping up everywhere. Doesn't mean it's not true. People can be emboldened to share once they know other people are sharing. But I personally know somebody who's had a Bigfoot sighting and was zapped by a Dogman, and then the alien thing is popular, and then that person was abducted by aliens, and so on and so forth. And now there's a true crime element to it, and it just on and on and on. And before you know it, you've got to say, well, there's a lot of coincidence going on here. What is it going to be? Anyway,
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And before we get on to, we're going to get onto the lake monsters very shortly.
Yeah.
Just before that, tell me about the Camberwell werewolf case that you included.
Okay, let me get that up here because I've got to get the detail right. Okay, that's not it. Okay, so
Lorraine, could you put the werewolf of Camberwell images up, please?
Yeah, and I'll just get it up for you. Here it is. Okay, I didn't want to mix up the date. So this is one I just have to point out, one that I gleaned from Linda Godfrey. So thank you, Linda, for that. But I did, fortunately, because of that, receive a follow-up sighting that happened later. So this was in October 9th, 1996, in Old Camberwell Cemetery, London.
Ah, cool.
And there's a man en route to see a friend, and he decides to take a shortcut through Camberwell Old Cemetery. Now, the cemetery's got about 10 acres of forest in it, and in many places, it's growing amongst the graves. It's really eerie. You'll probably see from the pictures. I've been there and sort of walked around, and it was an unpleasant feeling there. Anyway, so he's saving time. He goes through the old cemetery to cut through. Something big and strong grabs him by the arm, smashes him into the ground, and he looks up to see this large, dark, furred creature with a head like a German Shepherd dog, looking at him intently and slobbering and growling and stiffening his body up and down like a dog would. Then, just as quickly as it starts, the attack breaks off and it sprints off on its back legs, its hind legs. And then he says something really weird. He says he believes he was spared because he suffers from a disease that dogs can smell. Odd. That's one of the details I always look for inside. That's an odd detail. It's not really necessary to the sighting, especially if you're going to make something up. It's an odd, bit to put in, and that gives some validity as far as I'm concerned. So then, some years later, an Irish lady who used to live locally in Camberwell contacts me after reading this encounter and says she had a terrifying experience with a friend while they were walking home together late at night, 11:30 p.m., 2004-2005, on a summer's night. They're walking up Underhill Road on the cemetery side of the road, and on the corner of the cemetery side, they hear a really loud, weird noise. Both turn to look, and this huge tree in the corner of the cemetery is shaking incredibly hard, as if something really huge and powerful is shaking it with all its might. And they hear this low, deep growl, and they take off. They flee
Like you would.
on their heels in different directions. Actually, funny, which to me is, again, it's a great aspect. It's like it's an automatic reaction. They don't check on each other. They just run in opposite directions without seeing what's going on. And I love that. That's very genuine. I don't like that it happened to them, but it's a genuine reaction. And yeah, so that's it. I mean, I've been there. It's in the middle of a housing estate, and it's just this beautiful sort of, it almost looks like a park inside. This beautiful old graves, from the 1800s, so not really old, but lovely place. Eerie. Wanted to get out of there as soon as possible.
And again, the cemetery aspects of the dog man again, which is
Is it the smell? I wonder if it's a real thing. Is it the smell? It's I would imagine dogs have a great sense of smell. I would imagine something like that, if real, an amazing.
It's an interesting element, isn't it? A very interesting element, and sort of a commonality, if you like, with a lot of these werewolf dogman cases. So let's jump. We're going to jump back a little bit to the time that we filmed the Bo Nessie promo. We filmed it for your first book, which was Beasts of Britain.
Yeah.
Now, I certainly wasn't aware that the Lake District had its own lake monster, and probably I'm thinking a lot of people listening to this might not know that. So tell us about that.
Well, Bo Nessie, it's first of all, it's something that's centered in Lake Windermere, which is it's the largest and deepest lake in Cumbria, in the Lake District, intersected by many other surrounding lakes as well, by the way. So this creature, I don't know if it's got a past presence in the area. It seems to appear, at least in popular mythology, in 2006. And there's a journalism lecturer, Steve Burnip. He sees this creature in the lake, and he says that he saw a straight line of broken water with 3 humps, about 20 feet long, and went in a straight line up the lake. He nudges his wife, and they're open mouthed. They're watching this humped creature as it fades from sight Said the water wasn't choppy, so it wasn't the wind. No motorboats around. Then a photographer, Lynn Adams, is up on Gummers How overlooking the lake in 2007, and he photographs a creature from a distance, albeit from a distance, around 15 feet in length, and becomes so affected by this experience that he sets up a website to look for it.
Yeah.
I think it's defunct now, but it used to be called bonessie.com, where people could give their sightings. Later that year, a sailor reports an attack on his boat. And there's a 6-ton yacht at the northern end of the loch, near the River Rothay, where we were on the expedition. It just gets hit by a big, submerged object. Then 2009, we've got a swimmer called Mr. Noblet. He's hit by a 3-foot wave while swimming, and then something really, really amazing happens. A guy called Tom Pickles is on a work outing, sort of an adventure activity outing. There's a lot of things like that, lakes, little boats and kayaks, and he's kayaking with a colleague on the lake. And then he sees, in 2011, he sees and photographs an object which he describes as a giant dark brown snake with humps measuring 3 cars in length. I said the skin was like the seal, but it had this completely abnormal shape, and it moved with an undulating motion through the water. Now, the photograph, which is a very famous one.
Yeah, Lorraine, could you put that photograph up,
Yeah,
please?
well, it shows these fantastic humps.
The Tom Pickles one.
Yeah, and I remembered when I saw that, I remembered thinking, oh, actually, I've heard various sea serpent-like monster sightings over the years where there's been this description of these humps, or people seeing the neck almost fold in, on itself into these little ridges and shoot out. Could that be what he captured? Perhaps. Later, we've got 2011 again. 2 holidaymakers, Brian and June Arton from Home. They look out of their hotel veranda doors and see something 300 yards away in the middle of the lake with humps. Very similar.
I mean, it's a fascinating image.
It is. I mean, it really is, that particular image, and it goes on. I won't go through all of the sightings. There is a very particular sighting that shows an arched back and a head and neck from a distance, which I think needs to be dealt with, because that if it's real is significant, and if it's fake is a shame. But we never could get any.
Is that the other image that we looked at yesterday?
With the neck and head and the arched back. That's right. That's the Ellie Williams.
Yeah, Lorraine, could you put that one up, the Bonessie one, please? That's the one.
Yeah. Thank you. This lady, she's a journalist for Autographer magazine in London, and she goes up to Windermere to try to create a video through time-lapse photographs. This is, I think, is in 2014, and she leaves the camera there all day and comes to collect it around 3 p.m. Downloads the pictures to her phone, saying, "Oh, I've got some great wildlife here." Then she sees what she thinks in the distance is a swan. Zooms in, and you get the picture as you see now. That's the crop picture, the close crop picture. She said she didn't think it was a prank because she would have captured those responsible on film. I think it was 1 minute intervals. You would have caught somebody setting up the prank and taking it down. Compelling. I mean, but if the other photos are real, then why not? But at the same time, as you always say to ourselves, when you get something that's so real, that's when the real questions come into play.
Yeah, well,
too convincing. And
yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say that the problem with that photograph is that it's too good.
Yeah.
And I know we had a brief chat yesterday just before this live stream tonight, and we said that we were chatting about this, and we were saying that that's the curse. It's absolutely bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you can post a semi-blur image be called a hoaxer, and then you post what they're asking you to post, and all of a sudden you're an even bigger hoaxer, because I asked you for the perfect picture that you should be able to get with a camera you're carrying all the time. You deliver the picture, and it's not real. So what a situation to be in.
Absolutely. My experience is, if you post a picture of a bit of pareidolia and a bunch of trees, blur the picture up, you'll have like 1,000 people saying, "Oh, this is such great work. Keep it up. Keep going. Yes." I see two dogmen
Yeah,
and a Bigfoot, and if you
yeah,
post
yeah, yeah.
something that's like Todd Standing sort of quality, you're like, "Faker, fraud," you know, con man. And
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah, no.
extraordinary claims, etc. Demand extraordinary evidence. So that's fair enough. If it looks this real, if it looks this convincing, then yeah, you need more. Unfortunately, she didn't. This lady. I did get in contact with the magazine originally when I saw it, and they weren't really interested in commenting. I think it made their news cycle for a day or two, and that was it. Gone.
So it's a bit of an unknown then, although a fascinating
Yeah,
image.
yeah.
How is that image viewed in the sort of Lake Monster, Loch
It's a
Nessie
fake.
type? It's a fake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and for publicity, as a publicity fake, uh, um, perpetrated by the magazine to sell the camera they were reviewing.
yeah, yeah.
But it
Which
just
is
seems odd because this this legend of Bonesy actually, and we experienced the same when we went up there, Chris, and talked to many of the local people.
yeah,
Most
yeah.
people weren't aware of it at all. So it's
No,
not like going to
no.
Loch Ness and faking a Loch Ness sighting to sell your product. Who knows about Bonesy? How's that going to sell the product? And that's what that troubled me. It's not a really good publicity stunt. It's not to say they didn't just, you know, make the best of it and what they had there. They still could be a fake. But why there? Why not, Loch Morar, Loch Ness, or some place like that?
Yeah, I mean, because where do you stand now with the Bonassi situation? Because I know
Yeah,
we looked at one theory that it was coming in through one of the rivers, and then when we got to the location where
yeah,
we suspected that that possible out, if you want to call it that,
yeah.
it seemed too shallow, didn't it?
It it was it too shallow or was it too high? For the creature to go into the no, it was too shallow, wasn't it? That's right.
Yeah, it was
But
too shallow. Yeah, at that time.
at that
At that
time,
time.
is the river in flood at some points? I'm sure it is, especially in that area of the country. They have a lot of floods. I don't know. I mean, there have been sightings in other parts. There have been sightings in other parts, other lakes there as well. I'll just find them. I did include them in the book. Let's just find them. I want to get them right, so I just look them up.
I don't know
Okay.
whether you can you see that comment there by Captain Daz on the screen.
Oh wow! No, let me. Because I'm not on the screen.
Darren's
Okay.
saying that he was never comfortable about the size of the boat and he needed
We
a
need a
bigger
bigger
one.
boat. We're gonna need a bigger boat, of course.
Hi, mate. You all
Captain
right?
Daz, hello, my friend. He's such an awesome. There's I'm one of these people that's suspicious of everybody all the time. I always have been, even when I'm friends with them. I have no suspicions about Captain Daz at all. I can't even find an ulterior motive. He'd have to borrow, steal an ulterior motive from somebody. He's such an awesome dude. Um, okay, let me find this thing here. Okay. Okay, so look, there's a few other lake monsters around. So there's the Beast of Bassenthwaite Lake, that's close by, and that was photographed in the summer of 1973 by Rudolf Stavnes and Gunnar Jakobsen. Two guys were on holiday. Um, Rudolf said, resting near to the lake, I saw something that made me both excited and intrigued at the same time. Something strange was swimming in the lake, ducked below the surface, and reappeared some distance away. The speed that the animal moved was amazing. I've never been able to find out what it was that I saw. My story has been met with some ridicule. Sorry, Rudolph. That's just the way it goes. And then there's something named the Worm of Wastewater, in the Wastdale Valley, Cumbria. Early 1960s, some divers were putting water pipes into the lake for the Sellafield nuclear plant cooling system. They were frightened by a strange creature. One of the divers said, um, I saw it move off into the depths way below me when I was at 36 meters in wonderfully clear water in the early 80s. Skeptics would say I was full of narcosis. I say I saw something the size and shape of a giraffe head swim off into the deep. There you go. Then the Ichi of Ullswater. This is the last one, by the way. had a sighting in 2006. So that's about the same time as the sightings began again in Windermere. Betty Wright, she said, last year my husband and I and other passengers had a sighting from about 30 feet away whilst on the ferry crossing Ullswater. We saw a huge grey eel-like creature, humps breaking the water as it swims. 2 humps were visible at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and what was the account that you sent to me yesterday? I watched that today, by the way.
That was in Windermere, and I found that one just recently, actually, just 2 couples pleasure boating on the lake, locals as well, and they came across. Well, it starts to rain in this account. I'll just summarize because I have it in front of me. It starts to rain, and they get under the little canopy, and the other is lovely little pleasure boats you have with a little red top. They get into the canopy and resting on the lake. They're not really going anywhere, and suddenly this 30-foot long grey-green eel-like creature passes them, comes so close to the boat they could reach out and touch it. And they're terrified, and they head back in, urgently back into the dock, and they saw it. They saw it, and that's when did this sighting take place?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's.
I'm trying to find the yeah.
As you said, it's actually when, and that's the interesting thing about having these witness accounts, isn't it? Because these 2 couples had, or on the surface, just didn't seem to have any motive.
No,
and it's such a bizarre thing to say, certainly in Bowness, because when we were filming the promo for Beasts of Britain, we were stood in the high street interviewing person, or trying to interview person. As soon as they saw the camera, they ran a mile. But we were trying to get people to, talk about anything they'd heard about the Bowness, and they had no idea, did they? So the idea that
they were saying, "Bo what?"
Yeah, exactly. The idea that these 2 couples could just made that up on the spot.
Yeah,
and
no.
I think it's a really, really good account. What the hell they saw?
Yeah.
Certainly at that distance, close enough to touch. It's probably quite scary, actually.
The YouTube video was, I think so. This YouTube video was recorded in 2012 in September, so it must have been near to that time. I'd have to rewatch it again to get the date, but it seems to be within that rash of sightings that were going on. I haven't heard of any sightings since around 2014. So that Ellie Williams one seems to be the last one that was recorded anyway and reported.
Yeah.
So was it something that came in during flood from the River Leven, which is not that far from the sea, and got stuck? Do they, like I believe with the Nessies, periodically come in and make their way up the river to prey upon spawning salmon or trout? Now, the one thing we found about Bownessy, and Lake Windermere, is that the River Rothay in the north end of the lake, that's where nearly all of the sightings were, and there was a trout farm further up the river. So there must have been spawning. There must have been fresh trout moving in and out of the lake at certain points, and that's when people were witnessing the creature. There's something that ties in with Loch Ness about that as well. So in a study that a lovely a lady did for me called Debbie Monroe, of most of the sightings that have taken place in Loch Ness have happened near Inver villages. That means Rithermouth, Inver, near the Inver villages. Nearly all of them. In the south, is it southeast? Southeast, I think, end of the loch, where there are no river mouths, there are no sightings. And it's amazing. You have so many salmon runs and trout runs, and actually Loch Ness has a lot of fish, contrary to popular belief, and migrating fish as well. That's where most of these sightings are taking place, where they're feeding. Makes perfect sense. If it's an animal, then it's going to be following food, and that's probably the best time to see it, when it's occupied doing something else. Other than keeping out of our way.
So Robert McIntyre's asking, Andy, could the Loch Ness creature be a hermaphrodite?
No, I think there's more than one. I think there's, because there are sightings of Loch Morar and Loch Lochy and Loch Oich. Okay, those are connected to Loch Ness. There's also sightings around the coast near Fort William in that Loch Eel, and there's the big sea loch there. I forget. Forgive me. I forget. I will find that in a moment. But there are sightings around the coast of Scotland, as well as Nessie-like creatures, or itinerant Nessies, as people would label them, as well as in the lochs. And there are also sea serpent-like sightings, also Nessie-like, around England and Wales and Ireland, and also sightings in their lakes, like the Lake Bala creature, which is sighted occasionally. Now, there is a river that connects Lake Bala to the sea, which is the River Dee. It's not very deep in some places, but it does go through rural and isolated land, 12 miles to the sea.
Right.
So there's a possibility that something is moving in flood, or to follow food, and then moving out back to the sea at a later date. Certainly, many of the sightings that have been recorded around our coast and in our lochs and lakes have been creatures that appear similar in description.
So I mean, so you say contrary to popular belief about the fish in Loch Ness. To me, I mean, again, yet another area, the lake monsters in Britain. I don't think people have any idea, do they, about the number of sightings of these things, and suspected lake monsters in the various. How many lochs did you tell me there were in obviously not all the size of Loch Ness, but I mean, is it 3,000?
No, it's a lot more. It's okay, approximate 31,466 lochs and lochans. Lochans are small lochs, small lakes.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you telling me that. I was like, wow, that's crazy. So over 30,000.
I mean, that includes the islands as well, but it's amazing, and I don't even think Scottish people themselves really know what they've got up there. Yeah, they've got this pristine land almost.
Oh, it's beautiful. Absolutely,
so
I love
beautiful.
it. I absolutely love it up there.
I think it's the most beautiful part of Britain for sure.
I do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe I've never been to Ireland. I'm hoping to get there this year.
Yeah.
I believe that's very similar. But that's not to say, I mean, as I am like in the pre-production on Elusive 2, and part of my plan is to just show how beautiful Britain is and how remote some of these places are. Because I think a lot of people, certainly people that are not from Britain, have complete wrong idea about what Britain is and what it looks like.
Like a concrete paradise.
Yeah, and I have to say that the flip side of that is we're probably the same about other parts of the world. Particularly New York. People have this idea about New York, don't they?
Oh,
it's
no, it's so much forest there in New York State.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the weirdest things that happened to me, sorry to jump on you there, Chris,
you're right.
was when I was in the US in 2018 and I had to connect to Atlanta. I think that's a big connection airport. As we were landing the first time, all I could see out of the window was forest, vast forest stretching on as far as the eye could see. And I kind of tried to look it up in Google later, and I couldn't find any sort of list of it. I thought, that's not even forest, they're labeling as forest.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just a patch of green as far as they're concerned, but it was just endless. I thought, okay, you're not telling me there's nothing here. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things I want to do. I'm desperate to get over there and see it, with my own eyes, because I think it's just what I think it's an amazing place. The Redwoods is another place that I just want to go and see it. It just looks incredible. So let's get into Loch Ness.
Yes.
Because there's in the last few years, there's quite a lot's been happening. So can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening at Loch Ness?
Well, I mean, Loch Ness continues on, doesn't it? And when I was very bitter and twisted at one point, I said I described it as a sort of a giant cryptozoological Coney Island, and by that I meant sort of like an aging and decrepit theme park, and just because it's sort of a bit of a tourist trap, and actually the area is pristine and beautiful. I should mention that. And as far as residents go, even the most populous village around the loch, Fort Augustus, has 500 residents. This is the most populated village of permanent residents, has 500 people. That's amazing. There's 500 people in my street, so or more maybe, and it was really beautiful. But it was so much about it. Everybody goes there to get this Nessie shot, and it really got me for a while. But it does attract headlines. So all of the evidence, all of the sightings that come out of there they're sort of a spectacle. They require a pinch of salt. So in the last year since COVID, craziness has been going on.
Yeah.
We've had lots of Loch Ness cam sightings because, of course, nobody's been there mostly. And those sightings, 16 of them or some crazy amount, have been made by a lovely guy in Ireland who sits watching the Loch Ness, on the net camera all day long, looking for Nessie. Now the camera's about, half a mile or something on a hill from the water, and whatever you see there, and it has been proved on several occasions by people like Steele Feltham, who lives at the loch, and others, validating through kayakers and canoers and boatmen where they were at certain times, that actual Nessie sightings recorded on this camera have been canoes, have been kayakers, have been boats in some case. Completely useless. Gotta go. Gotta be out of there. Don't report any. In fact, on my Nessie and Friends site, I have a ban on reporting. One of the so anal. One of the rules is you can't report Nessie on the net cam sightings on the page. I won't ban you, but I'll just delete it. As I'm such a honestly, I'd hate to be somebody experiencing me. So yeah, this is just no good. In preface to this, before this happened, we had Professor Neil Gemmell come and do a new eDNA study.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
for
that.
several months. Yeah. So what he found, I mean, the eDNA is a new science. This one was collecting the DNA particles or shedding, I believe, from water samples. And they took several samples, lots of samples from all over the loch at various depths, and tested them for the DNA of creatures to see what was in them. And they found all kinds of things, massive eel numbers, trout, salmon, the rest. No seal, funnily, but then seals do get in there occasionally. So obviously, DNA doesn't stick around long. No otters either, which was confusing because there are otters there. No catfish, so that got rid of the Wells catfish theory, and no Nessie DNA. Now there is a caveat to that. How do you test for Nessie DNA when you don't have any Nessie DNA to validate your sample, right?
Stands to
That's
know,
a bit of an odd one. I think they use reptile DNA to compare it to. I'm not exactly sure, but they're knowledgeable scientists. They're the leaders in their field, and they did not find any evidence at all that there was a creature like Nessie in the loch. I would say that that's not, they didn't test the entire loch, so that's not proof. That's not conclusive proof. And at the same time, if Nessie is migratory or transient in behavior, maybe it wasn't there.
and wouldn't there have to be years? Wouldn't there have to be a few years of retesting, or not years, but do you know what I mean by that?
No.
Well, to
you
do
mean
it
going
once,
back to the same samples? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, nobody really has the money for that. I think they got. I do think they got some major funding for that. And of course, the news attention was fantastic for this new science of eDNA. Now, I love eDNA actually, and I seem to remember posting at the time that his results came out, Professor Gemmell, on my page, that this golden goose has finally laid a normal egg. Because it came up blank, and I think that affected a lot of people who've been there for a very long time. I don't ever see these things as conclusive. It's not. It's a sample, like you say, but one would have hoped that something, at least something that they couldn't quite get the handle on, or something that it defied all explanation, was found there. It wasn't. All of the samples that they labeled inconclusive were just tainted samples. They weren't unidentified.
And it's in its, as you said, it's kind of in its infancy. And
Yeah.
Di makes in the comments here makes an interesting comment, trying to find DNA from one creature in one of the deepest lakes in the UK, if not the world.
It's a very good point. But on another point, they did find lots of sheep and human DNA in the loch, so that got in there. And so, and we're not living in the loch. So it was from runoff from the field, I guess, from the peat fields.
My wife's swimming in there.
Did she? Did you? Oh, that's great. Oh, you say you're joking.
Sorry.
I that well side of me sometimes. I'm very literal. I just think, oh, you own a super yacht. Wonderful. That's great.
That's for the next trip, bait.
Yeah, well, the wives for bait is a plausible idea. I'd definitely be up for that. Anyway, I mean, it was a great time, and we hoped for the best. We didn't get it. I still think there's something in there. I don't believe it's always in there. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. So, what are the theories, Andy? I mean, how long we got left? Got about half an hour. So, I'll tell you, if we get a chance, we'll go back to. So, have you got time for one or two theories before we get on to your new book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, my main theory about it is that it's a living plesiosaur. It's an extant version of the plesiosaur. That's completely unpopular. Nobody likes that theory. Giant sort of eel or a Wells catfish or some huge unknown amphibian that we never discovered are the main theories. It's been described with 4 flippers and a tail and a long neck and a small head. There is no other creature that fits that. And it's already been described there in Loch Ness like that. But in Lake Champlain and Lake Channy and Lake Levinkia and, all over the world, these lake monster sightings are almost uniform, almost, in many cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems impossible that it should still be living. But we find other creatures we thought were extinct, and trees and other things as well, and yet they're still here. It's possible, I think.
And so, in regards to the plesiosaur, you said that's unpopular. Why is that?
Because well, this is not a dinosaur, but it's an aquatic reptile from the time of the dinosaurs.
Right.
They are extinct. The fossil record tells us that they are extinct and they should not be here because that was the timeline. That's how it happened, and anything outside of that should be squashed. There is the other aspect, of course, which is plesiosaurs were thought to be air breathers. So if it's an air breather, we should be seeing it every hour or so, or whatever its lung capacity is. Every so often, it should be popping up for a breath of air. There are theories to explain that, like underwater caves with air pockets and the like. My good friend, who's now passed away, Scott Modest from the Lake Champlain, from the Zombie Plesiosaur Society, and the Lake Champlain research for many years, theorized that they could have a cloacal orifice similar to some well-known turtles, other reptiles, that enables that turtle through their bursae to filter oxygen from water and stay under water as long as 3 days. And that's for a little turtle, like the Hawkesbury River turtle. How would that be if theoretically such had such such an adaptation? How would that work for a huge creature like a plesiosaur? 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, perhaps? Who knows?
Yeah, and are you? Is it? I mean, I might be wrong about this, so just correct me if I'm wrong. But is it Mike? I think Mike. Are you familiar with Mike Oram?
Oram.
Mike Oram, Oram. He's he lectures about various things, but I think his theory was similar to yourself, is that it was using the caves in the lochs to migrate.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way of proving it. Is there an underground cave system? No, but it could go out. Either way, it could go out through the River Ness, and it could go out, but it would have to be in flood. The River Ness would have to be in flood for that to happen because there's 2 shallow points. It does run through the city centre, in one place as well. Of Inverness at night time, perhaps in the early hours. I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch. There was a story of somebody seeing it there in the river when the river was in flood, actually, and I'll just quickly try and find that for you if I can. just before we move on. Okay, and this was in the book Piece of Britain. I tried to figure out a route, a route for it to get out Israel. And like in a chapter that says the beast goes east, the beast goes west, and trying to figure out a possible way they could get out either side, and listed some sightings that might have supported it as well at the same time. Now, in doing so, these are just theoretical. Anyway, so my theory was where the beast goes east was that in the east, the sea could be reached via the River Ness, which ties into the confluence between Bewley Firth and Moray Firth. And although there were shallow areas of the river where the water's only a few feet deep, and several weirs and obstructions, it's an amphibious animal, so it could move its way around where it needed to, perhaps when the river's in flood or after dark. And there was, apart from the St. Columba sighting, there was something I think that was listed in Rupert T. Gould's Loch Ness Monster and Others, where he recounted the sighting of a Miss K. MacDonald that occurred between Loch End and Abriachan. I was in 1934, and he said that she saw a drab, brownish-coloured hump rising out of the water 30 to 40 yards away from her. And another one happened in the centre of town of Inverness when it was in full flood in 1965, and there was some heavy rainfall, and a salesman called George McGill. It was in the YMCA building, Bank Street, Inverness, 11:45 a.m. They stood in the doorway because it was raining so heavy, and looked across the River Ness and saw a large, thick, ridged neck looping out of the water. The height of the neck above the water could be about 4 feet 6 inches. It was about 8 inches in diameter, and there was a disturbance where the neck re-entered the water, and another disturbance to the rear of the animal. He said, I can't say what it was, but it wasn't a fish. Never seen anything like it before. So, there's an example of it moving out. And the creature has been seen in the Bewley Firth, where it enters the sea as well by some people on occasion. And in the west, then, you have to go through, and I'll be very quick with this, River Oich, Loch Oich, Laganloch, Loch Lochy, River Lochy, bypassing Neptune's staircase, and enter Loch Eel, which empties into the sea via Loch Lean. And so, it's not an easy route. There certainly are some obstructions there, but I've walked that route, much of it, and I've walked it once it gets dark as well, and it's black, Chris. I went right down to the River Oich at night, and I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. So if there was something in the river right there in front of me, I wouldn't have seen it.
And hasn't there been some a few sightings of the creature out of the water as well?
There has, yes, there has actually. Plugging a great author again, Roland Watson has a great book on this. Look him up on Amazon or wherever you buy your books, because in my mind, he's the foremost modern day authority on Nessie, and he really does great research. He's got a whole book where the sightings are listed of Nessie out of the water. Apparently, it's only 6% of all the sightings of Nessie are on land.
How many?
Famous one is Arthur C. Grant, the veterinarian, who sees the creature crossing the road while he's riding his motorcycle at night around a loch on the new road that was put in, and suddenly this big lumbering creature comes across the road that looks like a seal with a big long neck, flippers and a tail and a small head, and stops and looks at him. Now, he's a vet,
He's a
if
vet.
it's a seal, he's gonna know it's a seal. He's got some experience with animals. Is what I'm saying.
It's a mutation, Andy.
It could be a mutation.
No,
it could be a mutation. No, but whatever it is, and it could be completely wrong. That's just my opinion. Of course, it's my opinion.
But the land sightings are very interesting, aren't they?
They're very plesiosaur-like, and that's the thing that keeps coming back to me.
Right,
But it does. And then somebody said it could be a giant mud skipper with a plesiosaur neck and head like lure on its head. And my question was, what's the lure for? What bigger thing is in there for it to capture? Like, if it's the size of that creature and it's got this huge lure, what size of the fish that it's trying to eat?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fine. It's one of these areas where nobody knows, so every theory is acceptable. But I I think if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck.
Yeah, you're probably right. And just before we get on to the new book, the last, I just wanted to talk about Lorraine. Could you put the Thames monster image up, please?
Oh yeah, Tamsin.
Yeah. So
okay.
So the picture on Andy, just talk us through the picture on the left there.
Yeah, the picture on the left was the Robert Rhines picture from Loch Ness I was talking about in the 70s.
Right.
Of the Nessie head and neck. That was captured on sonar. They had a strobe light basically hanging in the water, ready to go off when a creature approached it, and then the picture would be taken simultaneously.
I see.
Amazing. At that time, with that technology, how they developed this and caught it. That's something different. On the right, this is something that happened in 2016 and actually was one of the motivators for me to start getting into this more seriously. Now, I live in London, or the roundabout outskirts of London, and I was working in a centre, for many, many years. Now, this is near the O2 Centre, as you can see there across the river in the shot. There's a cable car, the Emirates cable car goes from one side to the other side. It's a really beautiful ride, actually. Somebody, a guy only identified by his YouTube handle, is riding in the cable car over the river when he sees this three-hump creature, and he films it. You can see it moving in the film, sort of rise up to the surface of the water and swim a little and then duck back into the river. And there's a dark shape underneath, before he loses sight of it when the cable car passes. Amazing. What is this creature? There are occasionally whales that come into the River Thames. It happens infrequently, but it happens and get lost. But there's no humped whales. That doesn't exist. It's a really huge creature by the look of it, so it can't be rubbish or anything else. But it's it's a one-off sighting. Maybe it's an anomaly. Well, what happens next? There's a group of friends on a pleasure boat near Docklands, and or Canary Wharf, I think, and they're filming, and you can hear this. I think this lady's name is Leah Kay. You can hear off in the background of friends talking about, oh, look at that rainbow. This is a lovely rainbow. Just natural conversation happening somewhere else, and she sort of trains her camera on this thing in the water, moving this serpentine shape, S shape, with a big sort of bumpy head on the front. The creature, again, this is about a week later. Now, between the first sighting, second and third, I'm already on the water, by the way, because I'm in London. I'm looking for this thing.
Yeah.
I'm out getting boats and all kinds of things and walking around the docks and edges, just trying to catch a glimpse of it. And then I've got a holiday booked and I have to go away, and there's a third sighting. There's a Thames speedboat tour, great tour. There's a bunch of American tourists on there, and they're coming past Docklands with all the Canary Wharf with all the huge, high rise, and suddenly they get this big black humping out of the water, diving as they're going in the background. It's a huge thing. The guy driving the speedboat sees it as well. And they're like, wow, what's this huge thing? They interview him later. He's like, yeah, that's kind of worrying. Something that big could just tip the whole boat up. And I'm thinking, wow, what is this? Look back into the past. There have been some other, albeit tenuous, but, serpent-like sightings in the Thames in the past as well. But these sightings, they stop after a couple of weeks. And then just around the coast, in the Solent, which is the stretch of water between the Isle of Wight and Portsmouth, which is not too far from London, somebody's taking a ferry across to the Isle of Wight, and they spot this multi-humped creature sitting on the surface of the water. Photograph it. There's a great photo of it by a lady called Jo Wild in 2016, and that to me is the fourth sighting, personally, of this creature. And then that's it, disappeared, gone. Nobody hears from it again. And
What year was that, Andy? Sorry,
2016.
Is there anything weather-wise, meteorologically about that year?
It was a warm year, I think. I believe it. I remember it being a warm year. I don't know if there was anything to do with Trump's election. I can't say.
It probably was. Absolutely was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's your answer straight away.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
So
whatever
let's
year it was a better one than this one, right? So
yeah. So
by default.
let's get onto your
Yeah.
new book, that's
Yeah.
Beast of the World, and volume 1. And I didn't know this at
Yes.
first because it's not been out that long. Hairy hominids, or hairy
Hairy humanoids.
hominoids, rather. Hairy
Hairy
humanoids.
humanoids.
Sorry,
Yeah. Yeah. As ambiguous as possible.
hairy
I'm
humanoids.
stretching it.
Sorry.
Yeah. Stretching it, but yeah. So basically, Beast of the World. Um, I tried to write Beast of North America after Beast of Britain. It was an area so well traversed, I just couldn't get ahead with it. And recently, when I signed up to Hanger Publishing with Doug Hychek and his son Alex, and I was looking through, and I said, "Well, look, I've got this Beast of the World idea. I'm going to write a book, and I'll put the various different cryptids of the world in." And I started writing it, and before long, just the research pages were like 500 pages long. I was like, "Oh no, this book's going to be like 1,200 pages long." So I split it up. This one is 375 pages, and it's just hairy humanoids. It's volume 1, and volume 2, 3, 4, right up to 7 will have a different category or area of cryptozoology that I'm looking at in it. I'm
I
writing
see.
volume
Yeah.
2 now. So in the book, I know I'm laboring the point here, I go into different types of hairy humanoids, or at least put forward a theory that there might be different types. So things like the man apes, so that would be things like Bigfoot or our big grey man, for example, of
Yeah.
Scotland,
Yeah.
more a giant man ape than a wild man. And then look at other things like the Almasti or Bar Manu. We mentioned earlier Almasti of the Caucasus Mountains and the Bar Manu of the Chitral mountain range, or that whole area there near Pakistan, which seem to be the same kind of creature, which are wild men of a type that's similar to the woodwows, for example, or um, uh, even the Basijon of the Basque Country in Spain. Then we looked at things like relic apes, like the Yeti or skunk ape or Yosemite, and then Littlefoot, like the Nimbinji or Janjari, if you like, of Australia, the Telema of the Himalayas, which is often referred to as a little Yeti, and other things like the monkey monsters that we talked about earlier. Could there be giant upright monkey type creatures like Biznachi or Salvaje of South America, or Cardan of the Himalayas, and then dogmen. And Dogmen links to that, the monkey monsters, in the sense of my personal theory, and it's not one I've made up, it's one I've inherited from other better researchers than me, is that there could be types of giant monkeys. And we look at more traditional types like the adlet, like the beast of Bray Road. There's Old Stinker, the is put in there as well for a British one, and um, other things like even the dogmen side of the Skinwalker. Those types of reports are in there. And then finally ending on amphibious anthropoids. Now, I wanted to write about mermaid-like animals, or at least creatures that would classify as that. But from this perspective, I didn't want the tailed kind that were reported. I wanted something that was more like a wild man that had taken to a semi-aquatic existence. We look at things like the Rusalka of the Desna River in Ukraine. That's said to be a hideous wild man-like woman with big breasts and flowing bleached hair and hairy skin that tickles young men swimming to death.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, what a way to go, really. Um, uh, I'm not obviously I'm not endorsing it, but yeah. So looking at all of these different types of creatures, and in the book, the way I've tried to set it up. Now, I won't tell you too many of the sightings because I want to save that for people who are looking at it. But there's a specific way I've set it up where I'm basically describing the overview of the area that they're in, and then something about their measurements. Are they 10 feet tall? Are they covered with thick grey skin or whatever? The way their tracks look, their behaviors. So, do they, like the big grey man, do they often appear in fog or thick mist and frighten lonely travelers, or the mountain make odd crunching sounds? Their habitats. So whether that's the summit of Ben McDwee or, the above 10,000 feet in the Himalaya mountains, that's important. And then look into sightings and evidence, any best evidence that we have, photos, footprints, even newspaper reports, and then we go into the theories, the beastly theories section. So, for example, with the big grey man, I looked into the Brocken spectre effect, which is obviously So this occurs when the sun casts an enormous shadow in front of an observer. It looks like a huge, shadowy person coming towards you. And of course, that's the way the big grey man is often described. Is this a meteorological hallucination? Or is it a high altitude hallucination? Is the altitude is it creating these features of panic and disorientation that some of the climbers described? Is there something about that particular environment that produces these effects with the climbers? So yeah, and then obviously normal things like, is it a surviving Gigantopithecus, evolved or extant and hidden? And I even look at the paranormal side as well.
Well, really?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, yeah.
A little.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't quite got you in the camp just yet.
No,
no. I mean, but looking, just listening, and we had a quick look at it yesterday, reading the amount of these hairy humanoids. Yeah. When you started this, were you aware there were that many?
Well, yes. This book is actually a really small selection of the ones I had a list of.
Wow.
A really small selection. I decided on between sort of 3 to 5 of each type, and there was, there could be 100 or more, really. I mean, just not on the types, but on the creatures that have names in certain regions themselves. That's what I mean by that. The types, were very diverse, and people like Mark Hall and Lauren Coleman have really done a great job of differentiating them, to marked hominids and true giants and the rest of it. And I thought, well, that's really too complicated for me and my audience, really. We're interested in a general type that fits into a certain category, like, a true giant and giant hominids would fit into the man-ape type, and, and so on and so forth with the others. We don't have enough evidence to split them into 100 categories here. But yeah, I mean, I think people, if you read it, if you get it, you should be. I hope you'll be happy with the balance. The theories are not just my own; they're common theories, and I've tried to put things even that I disagree with in there, and as an option. Maybe this is the truth of the situation.
Yeah, because ultimately it all ties into the existence of unknown creatures at the end of the day, and that's and ultimately, if you discover one, or you prove the existence of one, I mean, where do you go from there? So, in regards to the book, what's next for Andy Mcgrath and Beasts of Britain?
Well, so the next one, Beasts of the World Volume 2, we'll be looking at some of these aquatic monsters, like the lake monsters and other things. But it will be really diverse, not just lake monsters and sea serpents. We'll be expanding it, and the royal we'll be expanding it and really, really digging in deep to some really interesting and hopefully, as I've done with this book in some sections, quite underreported cryptids. Ones that have a good background, a good level of sightings and evidence, and yet people don't really talk about them because they're not popular.
Yeah.
So I hope that you'll find stuff out that you didn't know or that you never heard of before.
I'm absolutely certain that they will, because when I know we only had a chance to have a quick glance at it, but I think people will find it fascinating, actually. And I think, coming into this, it's one of the things I wish I had done. I mean, I couldn't, to be fair to myself, I couldn't have known the amount of actual cryptids because I just hadn't come across it. I'd come across the obvious ones, the pop culture ones, but when you start, it's much like probably any of the subjects that fall under the umbrella. Once you start digging, you can unearth a mountain.
Yeah, there's so much.
of discoveries.
And there's people out there, by the way, covering it, Chris. Like, I'm sorry for interrupting you again. I'm really sorry, but
no, that's all right.
people like Carl Schuker, again,
Mm.
sorry, Carl, one of my heroes. Constantly learning so much from the way he looks into these things. And George Eberhardt wrote 2 great books, which is more like a dictionary of cryptids in a way, I suppose. But he, I got a lot of influence from that. The way he set his borders out it's logical and it's helpful to the reader. You can sort of flick in and out. And all of the other ones I mentioned before, the famous writers and Lauren Coleman and everybody else that just does, great work on other cryptids, not just Bigfoot. Bigfoot is amazing, it's fantastic. But North America is just one place, it's just one continent. And just from studying for this book, I'm realizing that actually there's almost as many other sightings in other places of the world. They just don't have a population that's geared up for that sort of interest to support the subject, with merch and books and all the rest of it. So let's shine a light there. Let's see what's going on.
So where do people find out more about you and websites, and where can they find your work?
Best place is all the books are available on all the platforms in paperback. Thank you, paperback, and ebook, and also there's an audiobook of Beasts of Britain now. So if you don't want to read it, you can listen to it. It's like 8 hours, 13 minutes. We've got an English guy to narrate it, in an intelligible English guy who doesn't Hugh Grant waffle all over the place. So he's just got a normal English voice, like RP. And he narrates it really well. And I think I reviewed him. I said that I couldn't have said it better myself, like literally. And yeah, so there's an audiobook. All of that's on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you go for your books. It's there online, not too expensive. And then for me, best place to find me is Facebook, facebook.com/Bsov, or Instagram, Tumblr or Pinterest occasionally, but Instagram and Facebook really, I'll be there. I do have a Beast of Britain website. It's not updated, so I'll make that nice soon in the next couple of weeks, but you won't find much there right now.
So are you looking, obviously with the last 2 years, are you looking forward this year to getting out and about and doing a bit of traveling then as well?
I really do. I hope we get together and do something this year, and get up and look for some of those Wildman areas again, or maybe even Loch Ness or one of those places. And I'm hoping to get over to the US. We have been pitching a TV series quite seriously. I can't go into the details of it because it's in that process. There's no guarantee, but if it does come off, we'll be seeing some really far-flung places and some very unusual cryptids, and hopefully sharing that with people if they want it, if they want to buy it. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I think the concept's sound. I think certainly with a British guy as well doing it, which I think people will appreciate. That's nothing against everybody else, but I think it'd just be nice to see the Brits represented a little bit, in an international show like this. And I really hope, fingers crossed, mate. I really hope it comes off for you. And
I hope so.
This year we'll be, regardless of that, we'll certainly do something film wise, because I'm looking at doing something for mainstream myself. And also getting out, just doing some field trips, because we usually have a great time, don't we? So so again, thanks very much, mate, for coming on. I've really really enjoyed it, and we'll have to get you on again, and we'll get some, because there's so much there is. I mean, you could do a show just on the lake monsters, I'm sure.
I love it. Yeah,
and I know that's your thing. So so show number 2, guys. Thank you everybody that's tuned in to watch tonight and that's contributed in the chat. Really appreciate your support, and you're just stay sticking around listening to me waffle on. And thanks again to you, Andy, for you sticking around.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for listening to my waffle. Yeah.
That's 2 of us at it. No, so I look forward to this is bi-weekly, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time with another fascinating guest, and I'll see you soon.